sit down. Adri is a senior global product manager at Vodafone, so he's a guy that knows and builds his products. 10 years doing that, so you have pretty good idea what a mobile operator does by now. But if I think of a mobile operator, Adri, I think about all of the services out there, you know, data, SMS, voice, broadband, TV, etc. Fraud or mobile network intelligence, they don't come immediately to the fore. So how did you end up coming up with weapons against fraud in Vodafone? What do you have? What's your arsenal, I should ask as well?
Yeah. So thank you first for having me.
That's a pleasure.
I haven't been doing APIs for 10 years, but I've been in product for a long time.
Products. Yes.
So mobile operators have extremely valuable data. And that data today hasn't been, well, until around, I would say 4 years ago, hasn't been really exposed in such a way that can be used by enterprises to stop fraud. Some of you might have heard of Mobile Connect. The history actually started with Mobile Connect. It was around, let's say, really kicked off around 5 years ago. And the first real use case that we launched as operators, starting in the UK, really started with SIM swap. Banks in the UK had a big problem.
Yeah.
Someone could go to a Vodafone shop or a Telefonica shop or an Orange shop and pretend that they are you, and then they would attack your SIM. And as soon as they attacked your SIM, what would happen? As soon as they attacked your SIM, they would try to take over your banking life. So the banks really wanted a very simple solution to know, can I actually trust that when someone is installing a new banking app, as an example, in one of the use cases, can I actually trust that it's the user and that that SIM has not been swapped? In most of the banking journeys, the phone number is being used as an authenticator. So it started with SIM swap, and today in the UK, most of the major banks are using that API. And then the next, and I think the next big problem was authentication. And one of Andrew and Sri actually mentioned it here as well. SMS OTP does have a problem. And the problem is that it can be socially engineered, and even though today is almost frictionless because of autofill, the reality is that there is a better way of doing so. So what we developed is a number verify API that we work closely with all of the operators, and number verify, which is that silent authenticator, simply authenticates a phone number without an SMS. So it's, if I try to explain it to my mom, I think, well, what do I do? I said, you know when you sign up for an account where you receive an SMS OTP? This is verification without the SMS. And it happens frictionlessly on the background. Additionally, today, the Vodafone Identity Hub, which I run, is currently around 8 APIs live. And it's 8 APIs live in 5 countries. And all of these APIs do focus on solving a small problem. Number verify is frictionless authentication. SIM swap is about preventing SIM swap fraud. The match API, the KYC match API, is about making sure that when someone opens a new account, whether, let's say, you're opening an account in PayPal or Klarna, the retailer ensures that your details that you're signing up to that account is actually matching with the details that we hold against you as a mobile operator. So those are the key ones. I don't want to go through all of the list, but these are the key APIs that I would mention for today.
Well, you've got quite a long list, and then maybe later on we need to ask about that. We'll come to it. But I'm interested in specifically one of your product, because it feels like we moved from SIM swap is simple answer, yes or no, to something more complex and more interesting. Scam signal is one of your products. Can you tell us a bit more about this more sophisticated approach to fraud?
So I'll ask the audience first. How many of you have received a phone call from someone pretending to be a bank or someone else that they're trying to trick you?
I'll join in because, unfortunately, Probably
Okay.
we should ask how many
Quite a few.
times it seems by now.
So basically, this is called bank impersonation scams because typically people would receive a call and they pretend to be the bank. So the way that the fraud works is you get a call, they say, we're calling from the bank, you need to move your funds immediately from one account to another account. And a lot of people are socially engineered in this way. It actually is the number one problem that the banks in the UK and throughout Europe are actually experiencing. In the UK, where the statistics are very clear, 600 million pounds were stolen by people being socially engineered in this way. And it's not just happening to vulnerable people or people that are above a certain age that you could think that are easier to target. It's actually happening to all categories. And the idea for us was, well, how can we develop something that can stop this problem? The UK government called it the number one scam epidemic, and what we actually did is very interesting. We partnered with one of the biggest banks in the UK, and we said, well, can you share with us some data points of when this fraud happened and the phone numbers, and actually we tried to figure out whether there is any data or patterns in our network that correlate when this fraud happens. Okay. And what was very interesting was that when we received those records, we actually did some machine learning, and we're trying to figure out, is there any data from the network that correlates when this fraud is taking place? And we found some extremely interesting data points. Now, I cannot specifically share exactly the attributes that we would expose from the network because we keep this API specification private, but we have, through patterns or calls that are happening at the time when the person is making the transfer, we are able to stop a significant amount of the scams before they take place. So if you think of the user journey, you're making a bank transfer. You're entering the bank details to the person that you're transferring the money to. In real time, the bank would call the API and would say, give me this data. I will not share exactly the data points, but with the data that we provide with Scam Signal, which is analyzing in real time, the bank was, sometimes what we found out is that the bank would be able to stop 25% more scam calls by implementing the Scam Signal API, and that's in real time. And the other thing is, when you're stopping more fraud, the bank has to hire more people, right? You have to hire more people because you have to essentially call those people that you've stopped transactions and say, hey, we've blocked your transaction. And they were like, why have you blocked it? Sure. So the beautiful thing about Scam Signal is that the false positive rate is so low that the bank doesn't necessarily have to hire more operational staff, even though they block more transactions, because it's so accurately predicting that the person that is making that transfer is actually on a fraudulent call in real time.
So we're almost culminating at the end of it. We started talking about AI. You refer it as machine learning, but it sounds like machine learning, big data. It's almost the same. We apply into fraud, we just talked about, and the type of things you're doing is really multiple factors. Now, don't reveal the secret recipe, because apart from others, we don't want the people out there that are trying to fraud us to know what you're looking for. But at least you can tell us something else, which is where is this available? Vodafone, you represent Vodafone Carrier Services, VCS, international company. In how many countries have you got Scam Signals available?
So for now, we've started with the UK. Actually, today we are live with Scam Signal is blocking transactions live as we speak with 2 major UK banks. And so it's not just a concept, it's actually being used right now as we speak. And we've started with the UK because what we want to do is, before we expand, we want to actually get some learnings on how to even improve the API even further. So that's our starting market. The difficulty as well we challenge on expanding is that certain data points, and we as telecom operators are actually we have to abide by, obviously, not only GDPR, but also local telecommunication rules. So when we go to expand into a new market, some of the data that we use in real time to stop these attacks might actually be considered traffic data. So in countries like Germany or in Netherlands, we actually couldn't launch the API in the existing specification because traffic data is very, very closely monitored. So we do have some, let's say, challenges on terms of regulation when we expand to different countries. In the UK, it was easier to do, but in those markets, we have quite a road ahead. So, as an example, in Netherlands, we're actually asking for an exception from the Ministry of Finance to actually allow us to use this type of data to stop fraud. And in other countries, would have to take a different strategy because the local telecoms rules vary by country.
So, and we referred to that even before, with the things of the internationalizations of issues, but the localization of regulatory systems. So probably it's something we can help you as well. Let's see if MEF can help, at least provide the educational background, and you as Vodafone and others go and clarify that is needed and is a good thing, not an invasion of privacy. But we've talked about one use case so far. I suspect that just like you could apply machine learning potentially to something else. Are you working on something else? Is there something that you're preparing, another secret recipe?
Today, by the way, we launched a full version of Scam Signal with additional attributes. So actually, if the team hears that we're even thinking about something else right now, they'll start swearing at me. But yes, we are. We are working on something else. We want to solve the problem with trust on the mobile number. So the next thing that we're thinking of is how can various industries improve the trust that they have behind the phone number. I'll give you some specific examples. And it was actually mentioned by the colleagues previously. Today, 15% of the social media accounts are bots. Simple as that. If you go bots, 15%.
15%
That's the study that happened in 2021. It might actually be higher today.
Yeah.
So, as an example, social media companies want to say, well, how do I know that this user that is signing up for this Instagram account or TikTok account or any other account is actually a real user? Mm-hmm. So what we're looking at is combining different data points in a way that companies like social media companies can actually determine whether the user signing up for that service is actually a real user or is actually a bot. Okay. And things that we're thinking of are, tenure, how long that number has been connected to the network, right? So if the number has been connected to the network for a while, as opposed to a number that was just bought yesterday, that is a very good indicator. Okay. But also, has that number used data, made or received calls, or has that number, let's say, done any suspicious activity? And the idea behind it is to combine them in a score where someone signing up for a service can actually utilize in real time and basically take the user through a different direction. I'll mention something very specific. If you haven't heard of chargeback fraud, it's when you buy something and with the intention of actually not returning it and trying to scam the retailer. It's actually increased around 20% year on year. In the US alone, it's a £20 billion problem, which means you buy something on Amazon with the sole purpose of never returning it or scamming the retailer or keeping the item. This type of data and APIs that we're looking at is specifically looking at that. So if you have a trust behind a phone number, when you sign up for buying a product or a service, in theory, you can use that data in real time to determine whether actually that user has potentially malicious purposes when purchasing that product or service. Wow. So that's some of the things that we're looking at.
Let's look at how much more creativity we can get and how many more ideas. But before I do that, time is almost running out. I think there are some people out there that might have questions, so I might probably need to ask, and I'm looking at some of them. Any questions? No, well, I think you will have some of a question on a person-to-person coming up next. So really, the last thing is almost telegraphic, because we haven't got a lot of time. But if you were to say tomorrow, let's do something more about this anti-fraud, what would that be? What would you ask today to do?
So what we do today is our go-to-market is we work with a number of aggregators to launch these services. So these APIs typically are available to aggregators that, of course, connect to these services with other MNOs as well. If you are a bank or a social media company or any other retailer that is, of course, targeted by fraud, which is almost every industry, typically the go-to-market is via an aggregator because they want to make sure that they have a single contract and a single price for all of the MNOs. And of course, we collaborate as MNOs to build one API specification, but the aggregator allows the bank or a social media company to effectively call that API across as many networks as possible. So that is the idea.
The facilitations, the one single port of call that will put all of the mobile operator availability online, I think. Well, fantastic. Well, thank you. Thanks for your work, Adri, because on top of making, I'm sure, your business manager at Vodafone happy, you seem to be helping solving a very, very important problem out there. So thanks to you and thanks to Vodafone. Thank you
very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.